Hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Manitoba Safe at Home program, Better Book Club, presented by At Bay Press. I'm your host, Matt Chaudhry. Also, I am the publisher of At Bay Press. It's my pleasure to bring you the second event in our series, the Mother Goose Letters by Karen Clavelle. I would like to start by saying, before we begin the event, that we are on Treaty 1 territory and, of course, the home of the Métis Nation. Very important. And as well, a few housekeeping items. You'll notice that some polls will be popping up, and you'll be able to vote on those polls. Just a little bit of fun things to do as we're going through this. And as well, if you do have any questions at any time, you can raise your hand and ask the questions. You can type them in the Q&A, and you can also type them into the chat, because the wonderful Ariel Gordon is handling our back-end support tonight so that I can have both of my hands free. I don't know what I'll be doing with them other than just keeping them free. Anyway, without further ado, I would like to introduce Karen Clavelle, and as well let you know a little bit about Karen. So here is a little write-up about Karen Clavelle. She is a poet, writer, playwright, and educator. Her work has been published in Border Crossings, CV2, Prairie Fire, and the At Bay Press fiction annual, Secrets and Lies 2017. Karen taught at the University of Manitoba in the Department of English, Film, and Theatre, as a music educator and language arts specialist in elementary schools, and worked as a music critic for the Winnipeg Free Press. Karen serves on the boards of the Women's Musical Club of Winnipeg, the Manitoba Association of Playwrights, and as writer-in-residence at St. Paul's College. Karen is the author of the long poem Isle Air from Turnstone 2017. The Mother Goose Letters is her first published novel, and what a book it is. Here is the Mother Goose Letters. So a little bit about the Mother Goose Letters before Karen gets to speak here. The Mother Goose Letters comprises the annotated correspondence between Mother Goose and her cohorts in Britain concerning migration to the Canadian Prairies. The letters reveal both her attempts to wheedle her fellow nursery rhyme characters to settle in the prairies with her and their mixed responses to her plans. So, without further ado, welcome Karen Clavelle.
Hello, good evening. Welcome all. Thank you for coming. This is a kind of an exciting event, a refreshing book club to attend without ever leaving your house and talk about our favorite books. Well, my favorite book and one of Matt's, I hope.
Maybe, it is one of mine.
Maybe Ariel's too.
Absolutely.
I just want to thank you, Matt, for setting this up for us, and I recognize the support of the Manitoba Arts Council and others involved in making this event possible. I think it's a refreshing idea to run a book club this way, and I'm just delighted to be part of it. Thank you.
Well, what else are you going to do in the coldest months of a Winnipeg winter on a Monday night than spend some quality time with some good friends talking about a wonderful book with a wonderful author? Can't think of anything better to do on a Monday night. This is it. Though it isn't very cold right now. So, Karen.
Should we jump right in?
We should jump right in. Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, then
the first thing that we've got going is we're going to be opening with a reading of some letters, are we not?
That's right. And you're implicated?
I am implicated.
So I will read the first letter.
Okay, well, let me flip to my... Yes,
you will be Humpty in a couple of minutes.
Okay, let me flip to my page. And we should tell the readers at home who also have the book now, because anybody that signed up would have received a PDF ebook, and we'll be starting in the correspondence section of the book. The very first section, we'll be reading a letter from Mother Goose to Humpty Dumpty, and it starts on page 73.
I got it. Dear Humpty, you still laid up? I come to see you, but the thought of another transatlantic run shakes me to the quills, brings on a molt every time. Grizzle's up to the trip, though, but she does take a gander now and again. She will go as the goose flies. Why don't you come here? I should warn you, though, the old woman and her crew are bouncing around these days like frogs in the Nile, as if the mosquitoes aren't enough, and they'll probably be here longer. You know what happened, eh? Child and Family Protection found the old girl's old boot of a house unsuitable because it was old and, quite honestly, smelly. I never noticed that, but the children had taken to hanging out the windows like shirts in the wind. What else could they do? Times have changed. The little goose houses, such as we grew up in, are hardly big enough for two, not to mention families with so many children they've lost count. And goodness knows, nobody seems to know what to do with children at all these days, never mind the old woman's lot, and certainly not me. Best not to tell her that. Grizzle lugged the old woman over to help her out, as it turned out, 6 weeks too soon, and the whole horde of them have been here fully months too long. The old woman would hire the wood, straw, and brickworks, she would. And right along the lines of the story, Wind got the first house and Wind the second. So it's dry right now. The workmen are dousing for water to make bricks. Workmen? Workmen? They are pigs, after all. Everything's going north on us. Anyway, not to worry. There's plenty of room for you to hold up here, and you'll put miles between you and all the king's men. They won't see you for dust. No one cares much over here, after all. There's no king to offend us. Of course, there's no shortage of men who would be king. Look around. True, there was a harping prime minister, but the election changed that. Well, that's settled. Grizzle will pop around to collect you, and we'll get you patched up. The old woman will keep you in tea and scones and Saskatoon jelly, first at the fair. She's good for that, if nothing else. And it's as quiet as the swamp at 40 below when everyone's tucked away for the night. Regards, Mother Goose.
Dear MG, thank you for the offer to keep an eye on me when I am laid up. Really. I'm not just another good egg, you know. I am having trouble getting myself together. Still, do you have to put it like that? Collect me? So you can count your chicks? Those jokes, so foul. They crack me up, they do. But this one's too long hatched, old girl. Gratefully.
Noise.
P.S. How about taking Winky in my place? He hasn't a thing to do these days, just lays about, and some people are quite upset with him. Think about that. Him running all over the place like a spooked chicken, all akimbo, nightshirt flying, high time to hit the sack and make it snappy. Funny, it never seemed peculiar before, that calling for children. Don't seem the same now. There's no knowing what this world is coming to. It might be faster if you just wrote to him yourself. Yours, Hump. That's a fun one. Karen, you're silent there. You've got to take yourself off mute. There you go.
I took it off.
Now you're back.
I thought we could move on and have a look at what's going on between MG and Jack the Builder. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, let's read that one. That one's a lot of fun too. Page 86
I am
for
on
everybody.
page 86.
Yeah,
Dear
page
Jack.
86.
We good to go?
I'm good to go if you're good to go. Everybody, page 86.
Okay. Dear Jack, I am so sorry to pester you about this, but we have a little problem and we are in a pickle. No, it's a good sized problem. Well, to be honest, it's big. The pigs are on strike. They won't return to work for the old woman. They will only finish the job, they say, if you will contract it. I need help, Jack. I know. You're a forlorn girl, right? Your girl would not be half so forlorn if both of you were to get yourselves over here, the two of you. She can be one of Mary's maids, no problem. What do you think? As for your lot, the cow can't come. Of course, you know that. Mad cow disease and hoof and mouth disease aside, she's simply too much for the goose. The only thing I can suggest is that you start putting her through her paces. Maybe you can teach her to jump. The cow I'm talking about. If she can make it to the moon. Oh, Jack, do have a heart. All those children homeless. Regards, Mother Goose. P.S. Does your girl get her mail at number 10?
Dear MG, I'd come and work for you at the drop of my hard hat, of course. I would, but the old woman? You're asking me to come and work for the old woman? Are you? Do you know what you're asking? You want me to be the contractor for the straw, wood, and brickworks pigs? Those guys? Uh-huh. The shoemaker's children, gooseberry jam? Woman? They can't keep a roof over their own heads. Besides, the house hasn't been built that'll stand up to the old woman and her wrecking crew bursting its buttons. You didn't think of that, did you? Well, let me tell you a story. She asked me to fix that shoe of hers. She actually did. I mean, who lives in a shoe anyway? My girl hadn't taken off yet, remember? And before you could say Jack the Builder, there's the old woman, got me cornered, and what do you think? She's no one else to tell what to do. So, who does she start in on? It comes in and it's come in and I'll make you a cup of tea. And then it's couldn't I, while I'm there, just have a look at the boiler? And then it's in the light of the bathroom and she needs some oil here. And couldn't I fix this? She's got a problem with the closet door. And before you know it, she's got me in the bedroom and it's not bed legs she's got me looking at. No wonder she's got so many children. I'm not a plumber. I'm telling her over and over again, and she doesn't listen, does she? And who comes along just in the wrong nick of time and puts two and two together? That girl of mine. She got 3 out of that, but she wouldn't have got halfway to forlorn if the old woman hadn't gotten a hold of me in the first place, and she weren't there to get a gawk. But like I said, my girl puts 2 and 2 together. That's me and the old woman and her. And before I know what's what, she's off to work at number 10. And now, I hear she's signed as a pretty maid with Mary and Company Inc. And they're all begging off to goodness knows where. Isn't that where you are? Well, that's not all. The parson of all people wants to go and tend to the old woman. And he wants me to look after the cow and the rest of his herd. I can't get my work done. And to top it off, I can't even bring my old cat. Is that right? Well, have you given any thought to young Jack and his beans? People are talking about his beans all over the place, quite the fuss. You'd think they'd come right out of the story of yours, you would. They grow almost overnight, they say. He'd save the day without doing much of anything if he could come up with another house right quick like that last one. We We could chase the old woman up a beanstalk, and that would put an end to all of our troubles, wouldn't it? You can write to me again if this is no good, and you can write to me again if this is no good, and I'll see if I can't find somebody else to come over and build the house. All right. But honest to toenails, I don't know who I'm sending. I don't know who I'm not sending. No friends over there. And like I already said, I just can't see knocking myself for the old girl either. Regards, Jack. That one's hilarious. A lot of innuendo there. There's a lot of fun, a lot of innuendo there. There's a lot of great stuff there. Should we take a break here, Karen, and ask you a few questions?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah? Excellent.
Yes,
okay.
Please.
Well, I think the first thing that I'd like to ask is, and we've got a bunch of questions here that I have in front of me that I'd like to go through. But where would you say the Mother Goose came from? Other than the fact that she already exists, she's a fairy tale character. But for you, for Karen Clavelle, the author, where did your Mother Goose come from?
She came in part from me doing a lot of thinking about Prairie Place and stories that come from Prairie Place, and how the stories that we have come to us as children are often stories imported from other Prairie Place, in my case, the UK, and English language stories, right? That's what we had. Mm-hmm. She came about in part because I wanted us to have some of those stories and have some of the place in the stories that was our place, and retain something of the stories and the fun and the joy of language and musicality of them.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I think makes this book so unique is that you've taken these fairy tale characters that have been around for over a century, and you've sort of reimagined them in a way where they realize that they are stuck in this fairy tale world, but Mother Goose is not. Somehow she's managed to get out, and she's trying to get this cast of, really unique, eccentric characters into the prairies of all places. So what was that like, writing that? What made you want to talk about, this sort of subtext of immigration and use these fairy tale characters as the vehicle for it?
I long had an interest in migration, and I just found it interesting. All of a sudden, it occurred to me, just found it interesting to realize that the migration of people is really the migration of their stories. And the continuation of those stories is essential to the migration process, to people understanding who they are and where they are in the new place as well as the old. So that was largely it. I'm very interested in history as well. I like cultural history as well as geographical history. They just, and if they're fairy tales, bring them to us. And when you enter them and with the intent of changing them, you could bring some of that cultural history to bear, mm-hmm. and I think extend the love and the excitement of them.
So this is just like a personal question that I have, because, as a publisher, I was very interested in the book because of the uniqueness of it, of the fact that you've taken these old characters and breathed really interesting new life into them. But being somebody that obviously is quite close to all of the characters and knowing them quite well, did you find that rewriting their story, so to speak, brought you closer to them?
I found that I entered those characters in a different way, that imaginatively they spoke to me quite differently from the way that I had thought of them, or I was fun to think of imagining what would happen if you were in a position to talk to some of these characters. Doesn't
Mhm.
matter that they're not real. Um, it's just, what would it be to talk and engage some of these characters and some of the very strange things that they do that we hear about, some of which goodness knows aren't printable today, for cultural reasons and so on, and our own ethos. Imagination
Right.
is going different directions now.
Well, that's just it,
But
right?
they're a lot of fun to reimagine and replace. And yeah, maybe I'm going to slip this in here. I'm hoping that people who are in the room with us now and past being in the room with us now, maybe when they look on YouTube later, um, I want to give them a little bit of time to think and raise the question about what they might do if they were doing a rewrite of the nursery rhymes or of one particular rhyme. And I'm going to cite Red Riding Hood. And I'll bring this up early, and we will read Red Riding Hood or whatever later on. But for now, I'd like to just set up this question and give people something to think about in case they are of a mind to have a hand at writing or retelling a story to their children or grandchildren, or just for the plain fun of doing it. So Matt's holding up a lovely picture of Bob Haverluck's beautiful blue wolf. And there's a
Yes.
really sweet little poem that he's written with it.
Yes. Well, this is
Have
the
you've got that right there?
yeah, this is the first page of Little Red Riding Hood, which is found on page 5. And the whole perspective of this book is to show the evolution of these characters and show how they've evolved into something more than just, say, what we've grown up with, what we've all read and known about them. And you've taken a number of liberties with them, which are a lot of fun, and in some cases even a little sad. There's lots of hilarious moments, as we've just read with Jack the Builder, who managed to get himself into more trouble than he'd like to be in. So I wonder, Karen, if at this point, did you want to read a little bit from Little Red Riding Hood?
What I want to do is I want to set up a question for people to think about and
Mhm.
hopefully come back to when we pick it up a little later. So here's my
Great.
little bit about of a prompt, if you consider it a writing prompt or just an entry to the discussion. So I'm wondering about people's experience of the Riding Hood stories, and I'm wondering if they change the narratives, how would they change them? So in
Mhm.
my telling of the story, I wanted to empower the little girl. I wanted the characters to be aware of the story, which they are in the story. They know they're stuck in it. And I wanted them to be aware of the unchanging nature of the story and give them some agency. So the little girl and grandmother are always victims of the wolf. The wolf is always the predator. Another time might have taken me in another direction. I might have given the narrative to the father, for instance, who is missing. I don't remember any reference to a father in a Riding Hood
Right.
story at all. What if the mother or the grandmother was to tell the story? What if there were another child with Red Riding Hood? And here's the one that I thought of today. Does she have a cell phone? And how would the story change if this little girl being told, right, stay in touch with her mom, and don't here's the phone, make sure you text me if something goes wrong. Is there some humor in that? Could there be? Could the story take place in the city, for example? So there's my suggestions for to open up the story and say, could you do something else with it? And here's the question: if you were going to write one of the fairy tales, how would you change it? What might you do What might you do with it? So to that end, now that I kind of tried to set up that to read something for us to think about in terms of change. So, and that will be the Red Riding Hood story, or an excerpt from it. And I'm going to pick that up at the last paragraph on page 11.
Page 11.
Page
11.
Page 11, and then I'm a little bit of a lead in. So page 11 is where we're going to pick it up. But when we enter the story at this point, Red Riding Hood has been dawdling her way along to the grandmother's house on a lovely, warm prairie summer day. When the wolf catches up to her, though, she is waiting for him. And according to the plan, which she has with her grandmother, she's chilling a bottle of bad dandelion wine. The wolf offers to take it to the grandmother when he finds out she's got the wine. He says, I'll take it for you. And when he gets to the house, he settles in where he can enjoy the wine, and he's going to watch for the little girl when she arrives. So this will take us from page 11 to the end of the story. The gophers, housed in the dark, in the dusk, chirped and chuck-chucked under the clear light of the brightening moon. And in time the girl arrived at the grandmother's house. She saw the shadow of the wolf and his big hairy snout cast large by the moonlight against the bright white clapboard house. She saw the empty wine bottle cast aside. Red Riding Hood stepped softly on the board sidewalk and made her way to the side of the house where she carried on as the little girl in the story. Her little girl of the story, the smart one. Grandmother, she whispered at the grandmother's bedroom window screen. It's me, Little Red Riding Hood. Shh, shh, the wolf is outside. I can't play with you now, my darling, said the grandmother, groggy with sleep. No, grandmother, the wolf is outside. What are you doing here so late? You have to look at the front, said Little Red Riding Hood. The wolf is there. He drank all the wine. The wolf's hunger rumbled him awake at dawn. His nose took in the sweet scent of chokecherry jelly and bannocks cooling on the veranda table. He would have brought his nose down to investigate and snap up a bannock, but for scarcely being able to move. Tangled in rope at every turn, he could do little but blink, twitch his whiskers. He sensed the little girl and grandmother looking at him in his paralysis until they moved to stand over him. You've had the bed, you know, said the grandmother, like in the story. She had the night clothes all ready for you, said Little Red Riding Hood. And she got you bigger glasses too, which won't look so ridiculous on you. You can try them on next time, maybe. Said the wolf, his tongue feeling like the inside of a dust storm. He said again. My, what big ears you have, said the grandmother. Said the wolf. And what big eyes you have, said Red Riding Hood, but they don't see a lot, do they? Or you would have seen the snare before you stepped into it. His nose didn't do him any favors either. The grandmother was sniffing the wine bottle. You didn't notice the kerosene smell? It's a giveaway every time. Never mind. And what big teeth you have, she said. Isn't that the next line? Asked the grandmother. The wolf was silent. Red Riding Hood and her grandmother pulled on the rope. They dragged and bumped the wolf up the steps onto the veranda and into the house where the wardrobe door stood open in the hall. With little ceremony save their groaning for his weight, they stuffed the wolf in, lickety-split. Riding Hood went for the wildlife officer, who arrived in time with a wagon. The wildlife officer trundled the wolf, limp-whiskered and faint from bad wine, and watched as he stumbled off into the Turtle Mountain. And they all lived happily ever after. So that's my take on Riding Hood and the wolf. But I'm wondering now if we can move. Bob Haverluck's in the room with us. I'm wondering if Bob would have something to say with if somebody had some questions for him about his illustrations. So I am wondering if he might say something about what it means to provide images for an existing narrative and where his Mother Goose came from. So what I'm going to do is just show you a picture from one of the illustrations here. I don't know how much that will pick up. You getting a good
Picks
look
up
at it?
great. Yeah, you can see it really well.
Yeah, there's
That's one
one
of
of
the
the images.
superior color plates from the book.
Yeah. So if you look carefully, you see that there's a crow coming up the side of it with her beak in the air. And there's crow feathers coming out where the roll of paper comes through the typewriter.
Yeah, you mean the goose.
And the typewriter, hmm?
You mean the
Well,
goose.
feathers. And anyway,
Yeah.
oh, that goose, I'm calling it crow. Sorry, it's goose.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, the crow's on the hat.
And the crow's on the hat, right? Yeah, so there's goose, an integral part of what's going on. And a typewriter itself, if you can see closely enough, the typewriter itself has quite a bit of character. So if you need to know something from Bob, I'm not sure how to set that up, but he might be willing to answer a question.
Well, we'll leave that to Ariel in the background to see whether or not Bob is actually in the room and see if he's there. And if he is, great. She'll bring him up. She'll bring him out front. But in the meantime, there's a great question here from Dennis Cooley, if you don't mind answering it, Karen.
I'm just going to interject and say that Bob Haverluck is not here.
Okay, well, that solves that
problem. Cannot answer
okay.
any questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, that's no big deal. I can certainly speak to the artwork to some degree because I worked directly with Bob on all of this. And really how this all came about was that Bob actually had sent a number of preliminary illustrations, very early sketches to Karen, who was, Bob was rather enthusiastic about the work, but he hadn't really seen much other than, I think, Karen's very early letters. Is that correct, Karen?
Yes, he'd seen the original bundle of letters that I had played with and put into a handmade book folder to keep them loose but available to look at, like a collection in an archive envelope.
Yeah. So Bob had seen those letters and provided a number of sketches that really were quite charming and were immediately a great fit for the spirit of the book. And so I'd asked Bob, we'll say over at least one, maybe more beers at a downtown pub, whether or not he'd like to actually do some full color plates for the book. And Bob agreed. And so what turned out to be, I think what was going to be about 2 or 3 colored plates ended up being, I believe, 4 and 1 black and white, and a number of preliminary studies that we ultimately removed from the book. But the book has the final finished plates in them, and they are quite charming and quite lovely. And I think that, in many ways, Bob's artwork stands on its own in that it has its own life to it. It adds its own life to the characters. So where Karen's text and Karen's writing has created these alternate personas, or at least further developed these alternate personas, Bob's artwork has then taken that to the next level with, of course, a style that could only truly be Bob Haverluck, and created these very whimsical, very lovely pictures that adorn the book. Personally, I love the front cover where Mother Goose is actually using the beak of a goose to write one of the letters. I thought it was just perfect, and of course, there's almost a little something crazy and morbid about it in a way, but that's part of what gives all of this its charm. So it's Bob's work is quite wonderful, and we were so happy to have him work on the project. Wouldn't you say, Karen?
Okay, so you said Dennis had a question?
I did, yeah. Dennis actually has 2, but I'll read you the first one. Karen, you have been moving to and from Scotland for decades. Does that in any way relate to your interest here in immigration and emigration?
Well, those moves to and from Scotland, the movings to in various short periods of time. Make no mistake, I haven't taken up residence there, but the periods of time that I went were always short. They were governed by work I was doing at the time in my grad studies on migration. I was interested in what happens when people migrate, and became interested in how they are informed about their own cultural past in the new place. What can they keep? What do they have to let go?
Mm-hmm.
And I found those really interesting things to think about. Why people immigrate is another issue, and how they manage in the new place. So in part, I placed the goose in a position, and one of the advantages of being able to have this goose flying from about 1200 through to 2021, one of the advantages is that you can place her in the prairies in the 1880s, the 1870s, when Manitoba was becoming a booming place in terms of incoming Europeans.
Mm-hmm.
And you can imagine somebody being a person, not a goose necessarily, but you can imagine someone trying to find their way in this place that they know nothing of and really are ill-equipped to be in. So
Right.
part of the narratives are informed by that kind of narrative in itself, yeah. And at the same time as I set these narratives, I tried to be inclusive in light of some of the narratives that are in place in our prairies long before Europeans ever arrived. And I haven't taken those narratives on, I haven't changed them, but I've tried through the animals I've used, the crow and the drum, for example, and the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, I tried to at least recognize incomers and I suppose migration in a different way, and some of what it accomplishes and what's about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the book deals with this in such an interesting and clever way, which is that, like I said, they're leaving a fantasy world and trying to come to a real world, and there's something absurd about that. But I think that for a lot of people, their migration experience can at times be absurd. There's so much involved that's sort of working against them, and it's such a difficult thing to go from one place to another, even if it's just to travel, even if it's just to visit. And as we've seen, of course, in the current sort of climate that we're in right now, if we can call it that, traveling and any type of moving about is almost brought to a complete grinding halt. And so this book speaks to a lot of those difficulties. So Dennis had a second question, Karen, if you don't mind answering it. And I will say to the rest of the attendees, the rest of the audience, that feel free anytime, pose a question and put it in the Q&A, which is located at the bottom toolbar there, or type it into the, if you can't find that, just type it right into the chat. Dennis's second question is, the prairie in these stories is almost lush with flowers and small creatures. How does this sit alongside conventional views of the prairies as parched and desolate?
Well, thank you, Dennis. Yes, thank you for the question. We have a stereotypical view, which is still, I think, still very prominent and dominant of the prairies. And a couple of informating short narratives point that out. One would be the joke that somebody tells of crossing the prairies, that if your dog runs away, you can see him for 3 days. The prairies are so flat, and anything interesting. And the other dominant narrative has to do, I think, a lot with results of the surveyors coming and trying to promote the land as a land of promise and fecundity and abundance. That narrative is there, but that narrative is the dream. And the other side of that dream, of course, is the prominent or dominant images of drought, when there's no rain on the horizon, and grasshoppers eat everything in sight, and other bugs make the place absolutely uncomfortable, the gardens won't grow. So I wanted to work against that, and I wanted to work into the narrative of fecundity and beauty and lushness. I don't think myself personally that they're probably as lush. I hope they're not. They're not as lush as the Riding Hood story would indicate or would suggest. But at the same time, it's part of the lovely dream of place.
Right. And a lot of the time, that's that you hear that in Mother Goose's voice in those letters. There is an aspect of salesmanship in her letters. She is to a degree trying to convince. She's trying to put the prairie's best foot forward, as it were, and convince these characters to make good and come her way. And who knows if she has an ulterior motive or not, but this is what she's trying to do. And as a transplant.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, as a transplant myself, coming from, another province, coming, originally from Nova Scotia all the way out to the prairies. I mean, everybody that I talked to would always say to me, "Are you crazy? You're going to that deep freeze? You're going to that place where it's just flat and you really can't see, there's no mountains, there's no hills." And I like what you've done, which answers Dennis's question, which is about the lush terrain, about the flowers. And having been here and being somebody who loves to enjoy the outdoors, I've experienced a number of wonderful things. I go butterfly hunting every summer, and I enjoy cataloging them, and there's an abundance of that in Manitoba. They have the best long summer nights here, and snowshoeing in the wintertime. It's just a really beautiful place, and I think you've captured that really well in the letters, going back and forth to the characters. So what's stopping them, Karen? What is their trepidation? Why do they not want to come? Why don't they want to leave their home?
One of the things I was doing was having fun with the notion of each of them passing her on to the next one, right? They're happy where they are. They're stuck in their stories. They're there. Somebody's shaking up their world if they're asking them, if she's asking them to go to a new place and join her. She's really shaking up the world and the predictability of them knowing their stories and keeping them and so on. And for me, that's one of the beneath the surface narratives that's running through there, and that we're safe in our stories and we like them the way they are, and that's why we don't change them. On the one hand,
right.
On the other hand, we're willing to, some of us, for various reasons, when it comes to migration, are willing to take huge risks in order to change those stories, change the direction they're going. But the goose is, when she's writing those letters, she's carrying on, or she's demonstrating something that I've noticed is characteristic of migrating families and migrating individuals. And that is that when they get here, of course they want their family and their friends to join them.
Right. That's like anybody would.
That's about belonging. That's about being together and establishing yourself in a new place. When they're playing the game, again, to go to the other ones, when they're playing the game, they're enjoying teasing her too.
Yes.
There's some of that. When you get those stories and they talk about the pigs, they talk about each other in community because they are a community. And she wants her community to come here, but she doesn't want just one or two. She wants her community, and her community is those fairy tale characters.
So there's this thing that always stuck out, and I always wanted to ask you this question, and I know it's a little off topic, but it just popped into my head because you were talking about the pigs. And it's something about that animal that, you know, they always are portrayed as such awful little creatures. You know, they're always the bad guy, the pigs. I mean, if you think of Animal Farm, George Orwell, the pigs, I mean, they drove the plot. Everything about the pigs was bad, and they were controlling, and they did everything, and they were the ones with intelligence and kept pushing all of the other farm animals to kind of sway them and do their bidding. And do you feel that that's just, you know, an unfortunate cliche that's attached to this poor animal, the pigs? I mean, at the end of the day, they do provide bacon.
But I quite like pigs. When I was a little kid, I had a grandfather with a farm, and he had pigs, and they drew me. Oh man, I stand at the edge of the pig pen and watch those pigs, and you know, try to grunt with them. I'd have got in there with them if somebody would have let me. But I think the pigs are tremendously creative. I think they're great characters and to work with, right? That they're stereotypical is put them in the same class as the wolf. You know, the wolves always have certain negative characteristics too. Very few of them good. But these pigs, my pigs, are creative. They're intelligent. They're conniving. They're scheming. Right, they're devious,
Yes.
and in the aftermath, since this book has been written, the goose has continued to write one or two letters. And the pigs are always up to something. They're busy scamming right now when it comes to COVID-19. They've you know, developed stickers to put on things, and switched over from the illicit brewery to producing hand sanitizer, and they will continue to scheme and provide entertainment and humor.
That's great.
So yeah, I quite like I quite like pigs, and then they were great characters. You know, they have that reputation of being a little bit scuzzy, so you
Yes.
can play with that.
Yes,
You're
you
not
can.
offending anybody.
Yes. And there's an expectation though, isn't there? Like there's an expectation that the pigs are going to be, you know, a little sly, a little underhanded, a little dastardly. You know, there's that expectation, don't you think, that when people read about them in this way, in these types of books, that they are going to be the bad guy, just like a wolf will be a bad guy. You know, you're never going to have a wolf where you have this expectation that the wolf is going to be, you know, the hero, as it were.
Well, the wolf is the hero in one of the reversals in one of the Red Riding Hood stories, right?
Right.
I can't quote the book right now, but he does have agency, and it's the Red Riding Hood story told from the wolf's point of view.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So,
Well, should we do another should we do our other reading here, Karen?
It looks like Dennis has another question. Do you want to do that first, or do you want to go ahead and read?
Sure. Yes, Dennis has another question. Boy, Dennis is on fire tonight. You know what? Being an academic like he is, I feel as though you know, he really did his homework. He, like, you know, he was given an assignment, and he came back, and he managed to finish his homework. Okay, so Dennis's question is, your characters are wonderfully aware of being resistant or revisionist characters in a story that is already written. Where did this come from, that literary strategy?
Part of it came from a writer friend of mine whose name is Dennis Cooley.
I've heard of him.
In the revision of a fairy tale early on. Part of it came as well from another writer friend of mine, David Arneson, who wrote Fractured Prairie Tales and turned things on their ears. And part of it too is the influence of one Robert Croach, who just bears being brought to every reading and every event that I can think of. Because the characters, in those writers' understanding, become characters firmly rooted and yet moving completely comfortably and out of Prairie Place. So
Yes.
that revision, and the other part of it, I think, is, in fairness, is to say that I have some awareness, although I'm not particularly a crusader, I have awareness of contemporary issues. And honestly, I tried to visit some of those contemporary issues and raise them. They're serious issues, and raise them so that because I think we need to sit up and take notice of them, and, you know, giving the little girl agency in the Red Riding Hood story, and a bit of a feminist bent is one example. But another example would be Simple Simon and his pieman, who have a relationship that in other times would have been, you know, seriously detrimental to either one of them. And here it is. We're in some ways making statements, hopeful of more understanding for people as I introduce and just visit briefly some of the issues, just trying to open and increase awareness of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing. And that was a great question. Did you want to do our next reading, Karen?
Well, I'm wondering, should we go back to and pick up Jack the Builder's narrative on page 89?
Page 89. That sounds wonderful.
Page 89. I thought we could
Let's
work our
go
way
there.
through the Jack, page 89. Yes. Dear Jack. A bit
Oh,
stroppy,
Karen.
are you, Jack? Yo. Yes.
Just before you start, I was just going to say, be careful that you don't brush your microphone, because it kind of makes it a little bit.
Oh, I might be on it. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was just saying you were just starting to read and I couldn't hear you. So please begin.
A bit stroppy these days. Okay.
There we go.
3, 2, 1. Dear Jack, a bit stroppy these days, are you, Jack? Well, I'm sure something will work out. I'm happy as a goose with 2 beaks to know your girl is coming over with Mary. She's such a good little worker. And listen to this. When the old woman heard the silly maids were on their way with all the gigglings and gagglings and gabblings, she up and cat caboodle volunteered to look after your place so you could come to see her house. Why couldn't you just throw in with your girl and Mary and her other girls if you think you can handle all those women? Now, here's the thing. You mustn't keep Grizzle waiting on any account. Laugh if you want, but she gets put off. She'll dig her dactyls and there will be no moving her, come hills or high water. Trusting you will be here forthwith, Mother Goose. P.S. You might want to get some combinations for you and your girl. Pratt's has pink ones. Now that would be a feather in your cap. And I'd have a pair too, red, though, if you please. This is not a very warm summer and the fall is already coming on. We had snow in June and snow in mid-August. If you would, you might caution Will and the boys too. Mother Goose.
Dear Mother Goose, look, I found this here right up on the beans in a kind of old seed catalog. Keeps asking how you grow things. I can't quite figure that one out. You'd think if it was a seed catalog, they'd already know that. Well, now's I'm into it, and I'm thinking maybe you could use a few of these beans. You could trade them to Jack and get him to do some of that work for you, seeing he won't have a cow to trade back for the beans, I mean. If that's no good, just let Mary have a go at them and see how it turns out. She's got a kind of green thumb, they say. Mine didn't produce quite the way I thought. My garden, that is, but maybe if Jack or Mary plants them. Now I went to work and got you one of them packets. So here's the seeds you want, right here for you in the envelope. Maybe if you haven't wrote to Jack yet, you can throw the beans into the mix when you do. Hope these help out. Regards, Jack. And there's a wonderful little annotation at the bottom that says, there are no further reference to the beans in any of the extant correspondence, and the goose claimed no memory of even having received them. It's great.
So we have one more little thing to read from Jack, and Matt, that's your job. It's on page 94. And it's Jack's telegram, because he's had about enough of the goose invigiling him to come over.
Yes, right. Okay, so let me. Yeah, he's had it. He's fed up at this point. Here's the so the telegram's on page 94.
94.
And, yeah, page 94. And of course, what's really great about this, before I read it, is that it says charged to the account of Jack the Builder. And it's a DB Telegram Company. From Jack does not build Joiner's Row. To Mother Goose, care of Grizzle Canada House. I know your tricks. Stop. I am not coming. Stop. Send my girl home. Stop. Jack. You can tell he's done. He's fed up.
That's it? No more.
No more. He wants.
So I'm keeping an eye on the time here, and I'm wondering how much more we can do. You have a giveaway. You have a draw coming, don't you?
We do have a draw. Yes, we do have a draw that we're going to be doing here in just a few minutes. It's going to be a free autographed copy of the printed book, The Mother Goose Letters by Karen Clavelle, with illustrations by Bob Haverlock. But before I do that draw, I'm wondering if any of the attendees have any questions now that they've heard so much wonderful correspondence and back and forth, and now's the time to ask, and I'm happy to ask those questions, or we can even allow you to ask them yourself and bring you on the air. So I open it up to the panelists, sorry, not the panelists, but the attendees. Do you have any questions for Karen, myself, regarding the book or anything related to that? Feel free, now's the time.
I think Marjorie had something in mind.
Yeah, it looks like Marge's hand is up there. Marjorie, did you have a question? You can type that into the chat if you'd like, or we can put you live here. It looks like Marjorie, we've got you permitted to talk. Are you there, Marge? Seems we're not getting her. Oh, maybe now. Marjorie, do we have you?
I didn't mean to raise my hand.
Oh, okay. Well, then that's easy, Marjorie. We'll set you free there unless you have another question. Okay, so Marjorie has been set free. Does anybody else have any other questions that they might want to ask? Okay, well, it sounds like that was good and easy. We'll do the draw now. But before I do the draw, I just want to let everybody know that this is number 2 in an 8 event series. And this is number 2 in our series. So we have 6 more, and they're happening every Monday night at 7 p.m. And if you look now in the chat, you'll see a link to our events page, and everything you need to know is there. You just click on that link, and it's all free. Every bit of this is free, and you get a free PDF of every book that you sign up for. And the wonderful Dennis Cooley is going to be featured in our 3rd event next Monday. So if you haven't signed up for that event, you should go there right now and sign up and get on board for the Dennis Cooley event next Monday at 7 p.m. And then the following Monday after that is going to be Brad Smith talking about his gripping political mystery, the Goliath run, which definitely is timely because it talks about a Trumpian-like character. So number 3 will be Dennis talking about the Muse Sings, and number 4 will be Brad Smith talking about the Goliath run. All right, time to do the draw, and then we'll go back and we'll do a few closing notes with the wonderful Karen Clavelle. So I'm going to bring up my list of attendees here, and we shall do our blind draw. I'm going to close my eyes here. We'll do it like this. This way we can guarantee that nothing, well, no peeking. Okay, here we go. All right, the winner is John Hunt. I better put my glasses back on to make sure that I read that right.
Well done.
John Hunt is the winner of the free book. And John, we will send you an email after this to get your mailing address so that we can send you out your copy. Congratulations on winning an autographed copy of the Mother Goose Letters by Karen Clavelle. It will be signed by Karen, and we'll have that sent out to you. At this point, I'd like to thank Karen for attending this wonderful event and giving up her time and doing the readings and spending some time with all of us out there in the ether of, I guess, the Zoom ether of the internet. And Karen, it's been such a pleasure having you on, and it's been so wonderful to be able to have you participate in this. And I'm sure I speak for everybody in the audience. It was really great to have the goose spread her wings again.
It's fun to have her out there. She loves to flap around and do her thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I have one final question for you, and this, of course, comes as a publisher. Do you see any future plans for the goose?
There's a whole bunch of characters out there that people don't know anywhere near as well as the characters that she has first appealed to in this collection of letters. And for the last couple of years now, she has been grumbling away about writing a Christmas letter, but she's written a Christmas letter and kind of keeping things going. The pig's narrative is continuing as they adapt and adjust to what's going on around them. And yeah, so they're just kind of some fun stuff to think about. Nothing really happening in there yet, but yeah, who knows? Maybe she'll pull out some of those lesser known characters and have some fun with them. Well,
that's great. And I look forward to it because I had a lot of fun publishing this book. It's one of those special books that, yeah, it's full of joy. And that's one of the great things about putting books out into the world is bringing joy. And I think this book does that in spades. So thanks again, Karen. It's been such a pleasure. And to everybody else out there, I know it's been a really difficult time, and I know that the next little while is certainly, it looks like the difficulty is going to continue for a bit longer, but I would only say just take care of one another, stay safe, stay healthy, and do your best to stay home and enjoy the programming that's available to you. All the best to everybody. And a really special thanks to Ariel Gordon, who has the thankless job tonight of acting in the background and making sure that Karen and I stay on target and stay on task. Good night to everybody.
I want to sneak in a word too. Thank you again to At Bay Press and to Ariel for your support. But thank you for those of you who joined us. I'm delighted to have been in the room and shared a little bit of this book with you. Thank you so much.
Have a great night, everybody, and hopefully we'll see a lot of you at the next one in a week's time. Bye for now.